When people compare CRNA and nurse practitioner salaries, most discussions stop at median pay numbers. That approach misses what actually drives long-term earnings. The real difference between these roles is not a small adjustment or a few extra incentives, it is a structural gap that compounds over time. In this video, we're going to break down the $121,000 annual compensation gap between CRNAs and nurse practitioners using real-world earning mechanics rather than headline salary figures. This is not about hype. It's about understanding how demand, coverage models, overtime structures, and compensation design create very different financial outcomes over an entire career. The $121,000 reality check. On paper, the difference between these two roles is often minimized. Many people believe the gap is closer to $20,000 or $30,000 per year. That assumption is widespread, even among healthcare professionals. In reality, the average annual total compensation difference is closer to $121,000. That figure reflects base pay plus call pay, incentives, productivity, and overtime structures. This is not an incremental raise, it represents an entirely different earnings tier. When you zoom out and look at total compensation instead of just base salary, you start to see why this gap feels so significant in real life. Why median salary numbers mislead. Government and industry reports often cite median salaries because they are easy to standardize. For nurse practitioners, median reported pay sits around $130,000. For nurse anesthetists, median reported pay is often listed around $220,000. The problem with medians is that they hide high earners. They blend part-time roles, academic positions, new graduates, and low-paying regions into a single number. Median pay reflects the middle, not the ceiling. Contract work, call pay, productivity bonuses, and high-need markets are largely excluded from these figures. As a result, median salaries consistently understate what is actually possible in clinical practice. The hourly hustle advantage. One of the biggest structural differences between these roles is how time is compensated. Many nurse anesthetists operate in hourly, locum, or hybrid models where demand directly sets the rate. When operating rooms face staffing shortages, coverage becomes non-negotiable. Surgery backlogs, emergency cases, and call coverage drive rates upward. In these situations, hourly compensation can move from standard rates into premium territory. Rates of $200 to $250 per hour are common in high-demand settings. In critical shortage markets, rates above $300 per hour are not unusual. This creates income flexibility that does not exist in most salaried clinic-based roles. Geographic arbitrage and market power. Location plays a major role in total compensation. National averages do not reflect regional shortages. In rural areas, underserved regions, and independent practice markets, compensation increases substantially. Annual earnings between $350,000 and $575,000 are realistic in high-need markets. Willingness to relocate or work temporary contracts dramatically increases pricing power. This is geographic arbitrage. When demand outpaces supply and coverage is mandatory, compensation rises to meet the market. Nurse anesthetists benefit directly from this dynamic. The structural overtime difference. Another major driver of the gap is overtime availability. Clinic-based roles tend to operate within predictable schedules. When the clinic closes, pay stops. Operating room coverage does not work that way. Nights, weekends, emergencies, and extended cases are built into anesthesia coverage models. Over time, call pay and premium rates are structural features, not exceptions. Availability outside normal business hours creates uncapped earning potential. This is one of the most important reasons the compensation gap continues to widen over time. Future-proofing income through demand. Demand trends strongly favor anesthesia services. An aging population, increased surgical volume, and more complex procedures all require anesthesia coverage. At the same time, supply is constrained. Training seats are limited, education pathways are rigorous, and timelines are long. Supply cannot scale quickly. Employment growth projections of approximately 35% through the next decade reflect this imbalance. When demand consistently outpaces supply, compensation remains elevated. The ROI verdict. The pathway to becoming a CRNA requires significant upfront investment. High acuity ICU experience, full-time doctoral education, and limited income during training all represent real costs. The payoff, however, is substantial. An average annual compensation advantage of $121,000 compounds year after year. Over a 20-year career, this can exceed $2 million in additional earnings. This is not a short-term gain. It is a long-term return driven by structural features of the role itself. Why the gap accelerates over time. Compounding favors higher starting points. When one role begins with a significantly higher base and faster growth, even small percentage increases create large dollar gaps. Annual growth differences of just a few percentage points widen the gap every year. Delays increase opportunity cost. Early decisions matter more than most people realize. This is why the compensation gap does not stay static, it accelerates. The hidden paycheck. Total compensation includes more than base salary. Productivity bonuses, retention incentives, call pay, and overtime create a hidden paycheck that dramatically alters annual earnings. For nurse practitioners, the difference between base pay and total pay is often minimal. For nurse anesthetists, that difference can exceed $45,000 per year. This hidden paycheck is often the difference between income and wealth building capacity. Closing. The $121,000 gap between CRNAs and nurse practitioners is not driven by a single factor. It is the result of demand-based pricing, overtime structures, geographic arbitrage, and compensation models that reward availability and responsibility. Understanding these mechanics matters far more than comparing median salaries. If this breakdown helped clarify how real-world earnings actually work, consider subscribing to WISE CRNA for more data-driven analysis on nurse anesthesia careers and long-term outcomes. You'll see recommended and recent videos on screen. Click the next recommended video to continue building a clearer picture of how these career paths truly differ.